Kim is Vice President for Environment, Health, and Safety for the Boeing Company, the world's largest aerospace company and our premier sponsor. You may have heard of Boeing. I think they're also the best aerospace company in the world. I think I can say that in this room. Since 2011, Kim has been responsible for leading Boeing's efforts to continuously reduce the environmental footprint of its global operations, products, and services. In addition, she's responsible for leading Boeing's workplace safety programs and driving efforts to reduce injuries to zero. Prior to her current assignment, Kim was a director in Boeing Commercial Airplanes Supplier Management Organization and served as the company's program executive to the Spirit Aerosystems. She was responsible for all contracting efforts, supplier development, strategy development, and performance tied to Spirit. She joined Boeing in 1997 and has held a number of key positions in the company. She earned her bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering at Michigan State and an executive MBA from Seattle University. Please help me welcome Kim.
Good morning. Thanks, Tom, for that kind introduction. Well, it's great to see so many people here today and that we have a sellout crowd. Thanks to your commitment, certainly what it's going to take to help this organization be extremely successful. So thanks for your time and dedication this morning. You know, if you asked people what do they think about when they think about clean technology, it'd be interesting to see what you'd say. And you might get some that might conjure up some ideas about the entrepreneurial in his garage working to create a startup for that next sure thing. And certainly, that's a really important part of the picture and the solution set. But as both Tom and Kurt alluded to, partnerships are certainly extremely key. And you can certainly see that by the diversity of the participation at this morning's inaugural breakfast. So what does that require? What kind of partnerships do we want to see? Well, certainly corporations play an important role and we feel a sense of responsibility, but it also takes research institutions, governments, NGOs, utilities, and others to make things happen and really advance the clean tech revolution. So why is Boeing excited to be part of this? We're extremely excited to be part of the Washington Clean Tech Alliance and to provide a premier sponsoring role, active membership on the board, champion for an organization that will accomplish such tremendous things for our communities and our future. A little bit about Boeing and our commitment on the environmental forefront. I'll share some things that we're really proud about. We believe we're forging a strong track record when it comes to environmental stewardship. Just in the past 4 years, as some of you might be aware, we have increased our airplane production rates by 25%. And what does that entail? Well, that helped create 12,000 new jobs. We've added 1 million square feet of facilities. And during that time, even with that staggering growth, we're proud to say that we've reduced our carbon footprint, we've reduced our overall emissions, we've reduced our water consumption and use, and we've also reduced our hazardous waste. That's just... Thank you. And for us, that's just a starting point. So we continue and intend to build on that progress. We work all across the value stream, not just our own operations and within our own four walls, but we're committed to helping our customers as well reduce their environmental footprint. That requires clean technologies to make our airplanes lighter and more efficient to operate. That's why we're investing in things like the 787 Dreamliner, the 747-8, and our newest addition to our family, the 737 MAX. It also explains why we're leading global efforts to advance biofuels, as you saw in one of the videos here. We just completed our first flight of an airplane powered by clean-burning hydrogen. In addition to that, we're also committed to cleaning up the environmental grounds from past practices. And an example of that is we're working with the city, the county, the Port of Seattle, and other stakeholders to clean up the Duwamish and restore the salmon habitat. And we're working really hard on that. So what does it take to make these type of things happen? Well, we believe it takes a clear vision, dedication to targeted research, and a strong focus on innovation. But in short, what does that really mean? It takes outstanding leadership. It's my pleasure this morning to introduce 3 people that we think embody all of those qualities. So let me start by introducing Dr. Elson Floyd, and as you saw, he's been the president of Washington State University since 2007. Prior to that, Dr. Floyd served as the president for 4 campuses of the University of Missouri. He also served as president for Western Michigan University. As you heard, that's the state where I was raised. Washington State University hosts one of the nation's leading schools in environmental sciences, conducting research on a wide range of subjects from climate change to developing green energy power to the next generation of fuels for things like airplanes and automobiles. And near and dear to Bowie's heart, Washington State is one of our major partners in developing sustainable biofuels. Joining Dr. Floyd today is President Michael Young, President of the University of Washington, our state's other great research institution. And before taking his current position of about 1 year ago, President Young served as president for the University of Utah. He also served as the dean of the George Washington University Law School and law professor at Columbia University. In addition, he held several key positions with the federal government, including the State Department's ambassador for Trade and Environmental Affairs and a law clerk to the U.S. Supreme Court Justice William Rehnquist. Besides featuring the largest college of environment in the nation, the University of Washington is to be honored by the Sierra magazine as the coolest school in America as a result of its commitment to sustainability. Quite an honor indeed. Moderating today's panel this morning, I'm happy to introduce Ash Awad, who works for the great company of McKinstry. Ash is Vice President for work around energy efficiency, renewable energy, and facility services. Ash is board president of the Northwest Energy Efficiency Council. He serves on the boards of Innovate Washington, the Pacific Science Center, and Climate Solutions, a very busy gentleman indeed. I had the great honor of meeting Ash years ago, going through one of those intensive executive education programs where, let's just say, you really get to know one another. And I was impressed right away by Ash's intellect and his ambitions and aspirations on the environmental stewardship, but also serving the greater good. I, of course, was impressed with his quick wit, and occasionally and humbly, he'll deny his wicked sense of humor, which makes him just very enjoyable to be around. He'll be the right person to lead this panel this morning, no doubt. And so with that, Dr. Floyd, President Young, and Ash, we're really looking forward to hearing from you, and I think the audience is in for a real treat.
Good morning. Yeah. Well, let's see here. So, been thinking a lot about this personally, and scoured the internet, was doing a bunch of Googling for good questions to ask presidents of universities. So, here's what I'm thinking. I'm actually thinking we're going to have a bit of a conversation. I got some questions. I think, maybe you're aware of some of them. I've actually changed some of the ones you're aware of just to make this more lively. And I think that the general conversation that we're going to frame is around really the theme of today's annual meeting, which is really around innovation and commercialization. And so we're going to get into that conversation, might get a little bit of warm up, just to kind of get ourselves kind of set up around what these things mean, so that we can kind of have a level playing field, and then we'll move on from there. At the end of the conversation, I think there's a raffle, and we're really excited that Boeing's going to be raffling off a Dreamliner. So, I don't know if you guys saw that, but it says, did you look at the agenda? It says raffle, Floyd is the sponsor, the connection. Anyway, so here's the gig. So, there's 84,000 clean tech jobs in the state of Washington. And we ranked 10th in the country with regard to clean tech. 20 years ago, I was actually at the University of Washington studying under Professor Ashley Emery. And at that time, we didn't call it clean tech, but I guess it was studying something that looked like tech. Actually, back then we called it fuzzy logic. That's what I was doing. So, in all the years that I've been around this particular topic, almost 20 years now, I still don't know what the heck clean tech means. And so I thought maybe a good place to start. We've got 2 university presidents that have been thinking a lot about this. And so maybe we'll just start with that little kind of basic piece before we get into innovation and commercialization. So Dr. Floyd, how would you define clean tech? Not necessarily at the university, but just in general.
Sure. Well, Ash, let me start out this way. Whenever there are questions that you are desirous of posing to university presidents, just ask our faculty. They have all the questions there. And I must tell you, I have a team of faculty members and researchers that are here. And why don't you stand up and let us recognize you for your leadership. It was in 2007, as I recall, that the Washington Clean Tech Alliance was formed. It was formed just with a handful of companies. And those companies were deeply committed to new technologies and industries that would help with the reduction of the carbon footprint, to try to create ways in which we would consume less fuel, and try to find out ways in which we could reduce waste. And those are the elements associated with clean tech when we think about it. And that's what this audience is committed to, and I believe that is a reflection of where our state is headed. So when I think of clean tech, I think of those elements associated with it. That is what technology and industries are doing to improve systems, to make sure that we do that in an environmentally sensitive way, consuming less fuel than we consumed before, and trying to have less waste products than we had before. It's a fairly simple definition. But I need to say, though, that that definition is at a moment in time. In 5 years from now, when we sit here in this room with even a larger audience, the definition will change and emerge. And that's what innovation is all about, and that's what this sector is all about.
That's actually a really good point. So 5 years, we'll have a continuation of evolution around the day. President Young, hi. I'm wondering any particular things that you would like to add to the definition, and in particular, what I'm really interested in from the University of Washington perspective is how does clean tech get manifested, if you will, within your academic programs and some of the different research pieces that you folks are doing?
Well, I thank you for an opportunity to sort of address that, because I think this is a group that we particularly enjoy partnering with on a lot of that. Even with respect to Boeing, we talked about the Greenline, and we had an opportunity to work closely with them. I think 87 of the parts, more than I tell them, but 87 of the parts of the Greenline was jointly developed from our composite materials work. But I think that's a reflection. I actually asked the same question. When I was invited to speak here, I sort of said, well, I'm delighted to speak. I don't know what clean tech is, but I'm an academic. That doesn't preclude me from talking a great deal about it. So I actually did that thing the university presidents always do. I said, I went to our extraordinary faculty. I said, what are you doing with my call in the ambit, the definition of that? And I got 4 single-spaced pages of projects and work that's going on. The range of it, absolutely extraordinary. Just stunned me. I mean, everything from, we also work on biofuels, some of the more conventional things. We wanted to do sort of an in-depth look at one project we were doing on tidal currents. Because when you think about that, you think how permanent those are. it's not even a question of renewable. They are moment to moment. But the definition was much broader. Taking small kinds of appliances and finding ways in which they can draw energy actually out of their surroundings. And looking at a whole range of different materials that use far less energy both in their production and ones produced in their actual use. Ways in which recycling can be done much more efficiently and effectively, protein design, looking at ways in which we develop solar cells. Right now, solar cells are sort of thick and cumbersome, and they're developing polymers and proteins that actually can be printed on something as thin as newspapers, and made both flexible. Looking at battery storage, the capacity for enhancing the efficiency and effectiveness of batteries. Work that's going on LEDs to basically change the light wavelengths so that LEDs actually can be used in a much broader range of environments than we currently use them. So the list went on and on. And I mean, it's no surprise that at a certain level we get more extramural research funding than any other university in the nation except Johns Hopkins. And what struck me was how much of it was focused on things that are in a way designed to reduce our consumption, create significantly enhanced efficiencies, to be able to take what goes on in the world and sort of recycle everything from solar power to tidal power to materials of any sort that themselves create their own efficiency. And the other half of your question really is, so how does this manifest itself in the research? That's part of it, but we're also very much in the process of teaching. And so making sure that we have, you saw some of our students with posters out there who are themselves doing this work, but it's also this sort of shift in attitude about how one engages the world, rather as exploited resources, as sort of a partnership with resources. For example, this year, we were nominated named as the most sustainable university campus on the planet. But that's both research and teaching. And even at graduation this year, for example, we had all our students sitting out there in the normal black graduation rows. They were made out of recycled plastic bottles. We saved 100,000 plastic bottles that were valuable landfills in those rows. So it's things like that I think create, again, another generation of people who not only are doing the research, but engaged in using that research in ways that create businesses and create markets and create lives that are designed, that are inclined to keep that sustainable.
Thank you. Dr. Floyd, we've had great experiences with Washington University, for instance, Michael Wilcott and some of the sustainable design lab efforts that we folks got going on. So would you share with the group a bit more about some of the things that are, again, we saw some of the bits on the research side, about the academic program side. What are we going to teach the next generation of kids to be thinking about clean tech topics?
Sure. Mike is in the audience, and he'll have an opportunity perhaps to talk about a lot of his work and his research in this particular space. But it's just reflective of where we are as an institution. And I would submit to you, it's reflective of where we are as a state. There is no doubt that the state of Washington, through the University of Washington and Washington State University, can be the consummate leaders in the context of clean technology. And we will do that in full and complete partnership with the state and with the private sector. Because our faculty members and researchers must and should be engaged in research that is fueling what needs to happen from a public policy perspective, but also trying to add to the commercialization that will ultimately fuel this economy. And so our faculty is engaged in those vexing issues that are confronting our state and ultimately where we need to go as a country. And so let me give you some very specific examples associated with it. Mike and his colleagues are really working on new fuel sources using woody products. to make sure that we have alternative energy sources that will fuel our society both now and tomorrow in ways that will have the same rigor, the same performance mechanisms that you've come to enjoy. The $40 million NARA grant is one example of it, in which we are using these woody products to create bioproducts and biofuels. But we're doing that with the existing wood stock, the forestry stock, the products that are lying on the ground, and transforming that into energy. And we're using it with weed substances, and we're using it with switchgrass. I mean, that's new discovery, that's innovation, that's creativity, and that's fueling this economy. And that's what our faculty members engaged in. We have one of our faculty members in the audience today who has produced a new crystallized lithium-ion battery that will have 3 times the life of the existing battery that you use to power your computers or your smartphones. It will also be cheaper than the batteries that you're using currently. And it will also perform at a higher level. And that is how the state's investment has been down to the benefit of Washingtonians first and foremost. Because we will keep those technologies within our state, and then the ripple effect that will have not only nationally, but the global impact that will occur. Our Sustainable Home Initiative is yet another example of it. Making sure that we do everything that we can to effectively deploy the energy that's used in our homes in a very meaningful way. So we have decided that our strategic priority within the university is to continue to invest in clean technology. We made a request of the legislature to have a new building, which will be populated by researchers and faculty members across the whole institution in a collaborative way, using the synergies from multiple colleges to create this clean tech alliance, if you will, on our campus itself. We are really enthused and excited about that. And we know as a consequence we'll have greater innovation, much more commercialization that's happened before, in lockstep with where Washingtonians must and should be, and leading, if you will, this whole conversation about clean tech. We have the right faculty members, we have the right students in place to produce those discoveries. Really proud of our work.
That's great, thank you. Well, let's pivot a little bit more and talk about innovation. So in the last, call it half a decade or so, the amount of money that has moved into clean tech has been, I guess, significantly more than it was the half a decade prior. And I was asking Michael Butler just a little while ago, and he was explaining to me that, you know, in the quarters leading up to the second quarter, we were seeing quite a rise in clean tech investment. If you, Michael, noted about 20%. Now that money has quickly diverted and has been moving into natural gas exploration, and so, you know, the money was in clean tech. Now it's pivoted a little bit more and kind of thinking more about natural gas. And so when I start to think about innovation, I also think about the recent call by the IEA to actually invest $36 trillion over the next 40 years, roughly, in clean energy. And so there's this kind of call to invest. The government has invested through the ARA funding and through ARA-E in a variety of different facets. But yet somehow we kind of ebb and flow between government subsidies, private capital. It's not really consistent and steady state. And so I guess I'm wondering, what is that right mix between government subsidies, the research that the universities do, and how you all get funded, and the role of private capital to kind of get clean tech moving on a more consistent basis? So
I can start. You know, the federal government has been a huge champion of helping with basic research. The new wave, however, in the future is going to be predicated on what I refer to as contract-based research, having very defined deliverables that we will then produce in a time that's mutually agreed upon, and that our faculty members understand that. I've talked a little bit about the narrow grant. That is yet one example of the deliverables that we must have in place for the team of researchers, actually between WSU and the University of Washington, And we're very clear with the U.S. Department of Agriculture about the time frame associated with it. What we need are catalyst dollars, both from the private sector as well as from the public sector, that will help infuse the research that we're talking about. And then for the federal government, quite frankly, to get out of our way and allow our researchers then to produce the work and the scholarship and the outcomes that's expected, consistent with the protocol that was put in place initially. And we also need the state to allow our researchers to commercialize as quickly as we can the intellectual property which they produce. We have a program in our state that's referred to as the STARS program, in which selected researchers were appointed at the University of Washington and Washington State University that's really committed to this industry, that's really committed to new research. And out of that, in the context of clean technology at WSU, we've seen some 69 patents come as a consequence of it. And to those legislators who are in the audience, we've seen a return on the investment that you've made in WSU 17 to 1. 17 to 1. That's a pretty good margin any way you look at it. And so that's the role that we need. We need seed funds. We need venture capital funds. We need those stimulating dollars that will then enable our faculty members to engage in that research. And then we need you to get out of their way and allow them to have those deliverables. And that's what we're engaged in.
Yeah, I like that part, get out of the way. That's good.
I think I'm about 80% where President Floyd is, with a couple of caveats, I think. One of the keys, I think, to if you look at America, it's been very interesting over a 100-year period. We have largely sustained the same percentage of the world's GDP over 100, about 24.5%. That's not unusual at a certain level. There have been countries that have been moved larger on the world scale and for longer periods of time. What's different from this period is how we have done it through these significant and epical shifts in the world economy, from basically an agricultural economy to a trading economy to an industrial economy to a service-based economy to a knowledge-based economy. Part of the reason we're at the forefront is we have had an enormous capacity for basic research that has given us the platform on which to build things. I think one of the things that's true of this field is that the basic research is still absolutely critical. We're getting to a point where there are lots of translational and development opportunities, but I think we're still at a point where there's an awful lot of basic work that needs to be done to lay some foundation for that translation. Here's where I think it is absolutely critical. Federal funding and most states are putting research money into this as well, into the major research universities in their states. If we don't do that, whatever translational capacity we have, we will ultimately fall behind. So I think we're still there. I mean, I'll give you a couple of small examples of it. We're also have one of the $40 million grants to work on the alternate sources of biofuels and so forth. Taking a slightly different approach, we're looking at poplar trees, which can be grown in a fairly efficient way with minimal carbon footprint, et cetera, all made possible by the work that a professor did 25 years ago, looking at the genetic profiles and so forth of poplars. Now, who would have ever thought that connection would ultimately make sense in there? In fact, he was roundly decried by his colleagues who were all looking at Douglas firs, which is what you're supposed to look at in Washington. He was studying poplars. That has now become the basis for what could be found in transformers of ultimate fuel. Another example, the MRI. We think of what an extraordinary thing that is in terms of medical diagnostics and so on. It wasn't developed at all for that purpose. Developed for an entirely different purpose. Ended up on a lark on a Saturday afternoon, two professors thinking, gee, it'd be interesting to stick a rat's tail in there and see what we can see. This is a literally true story. And the rest is history. So I think Elson's absolutely right. We need to really work on the contract-based research with our colleagues in the private sector. We need to build on the basic research that's been done. We have revamped our Office of Commercialization. I think Lyndon Rhodes is with us today, doing extraordinary work in trying to make what we do at the university much more accessible to the private sector, because that's not what we do. We need that partnership. It's got to be intimate, it's got to be deep, it's got to be integrated, and that's very, very important. But I also think potentially this is not a field that's mature enough yet that we know where the breakthroughs and developmental opportunities will occur. Basic research is absolutely foundational.
Sure. And actually, I would just simply like to add one other thing. There must be alignment between the competency of our researchers and the needs that are identified. A specific example is the work that we are engaged in as an institution on the smart grid. We know that there are a number of power issues that will impact not only the United States, but the global influence. And if we have faculty members and researchers who can help us to create a new grid, a smart grid, if you will, that alignment is really key for those social and economic issues that will impact our country ultimately. It is that alignment that's really important, and using the intellectual power and skills of our researchers to be able to have those intersections with that research.
Yeah, well, actually, you're kind of launching off in an area that I've been a bit curious about. So I don't know how well represented in this particular room, but I know in the span of clean tech, because it's just so nascent, that much of clean tech is being born out of someone's garage. It's actually both at the university, but it's also someone kind of working on some new idea. So what would be your thoughts about collaboration with smaller entities, not necessarily the Boeings or the Alstroms of the world, but the smaller entities, the smaller startups? How would you think of collaborating with those particular folks around new and interesting ideas?
Sure. Just talk to our students that are in the audience. You see their poster boards around this room, and they represent the future. And they have the most stimulating ideas because they are willing to think outside of the box. There are no impediments associated with the solutions that they believe can occur into the future. And those are the individuals who will be working out of the garages and working out of the small labs. And those are the individuals who will collaborate with each other using the expertise and skill of the researchers with whom they collaborate with in the labs within our colleges and universities. They represent our future. We have a program at WSU in which we have high school students, and it's just an amazing program, if you will, in which they literally come to Pullman and then bring their solutions to many of the energy issues that are impacting us in the whole space of clean technology. And I would urge this audience to come to WSU and be a part of our innovation series. And it's not with our faculty members, but it's with high school students who are thinking in a very creative and different way, bringing real solutions. And many of you have been there. For those who have not been a part of it, I really do encourage you. You will be excited and enthused about the future that's predicated on the intellect of the next generation of researchers.
I think that kind of collaboration with those who are doing this in the quantum space is really important. One of the things we're working on in our commercialization office, which, as I say, has been enormously successful in enhancing the efficiencies of the transfer of that technology and our capacity to bring the private sector into partnership with our scientists has been very powerful. But at the same time, what it also has demonstrated to us our capacity to provide templates and spaces where that innovation can be enhanced by collaboration with the university, even on that smaller scale. In fact, we just renovated one of our buildings in order to provide incubator space for companies that see the potential for a partnership with technology from the university, or technology that they bring to the table that somehow is accelerated and complemented by work that's going on at the university, so that we can provide services to those entities as well I think this is one of those areas where you really have to say, at this point is the village, you really have to have 1,000 flowers acre bloom. And to the extent we have infrastructure and platforms that can enhance that, that's exactly what we're trying to do.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective. The 1,000 flowers, I think, is a good perspective to have relative to the next question on my mind. I've had the opportunity to be, I think as many of us who sit on different committees and have a variety of different conversations around the topic of clean tech. One common theme I've heard, and I've always been I've wrestled around with this, I feel very frank, is the idea that we cannot pick winners and losers. I think that's your point about the 1,000 flowers and the number of research that might have to happen. Yet every day I see us essentially picking winners and losers. You know, the federal government kind of deciding what to invest in and what not to invest in. The universities deciding what to research on and what not to research on. So I guess I could use some help kind of reconciling so what does it mean to not pick winners and losers? And can we actually really spread ourselves as Americans so thin that we actually may not be doubling down on the idea that might benefit us the most? So what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think to some large extent, we're always making bets. And I think we inevitably have to. One of the great things about great research universities is the bets are very ecumenical. That is to say, you hire really, really terrific people with some administrative capacity, and you turn them loose. And they make a case to federal funding agencies, for example, that the work I'm doing is likely to be conducted in the following ways, and if they can convince their peers that there is something solid behind that, then grant comes in. And as I mentioned earlier, our scientists are stunningly successful in doing that. But there is some sense in which their peers are sort of judging whether that looks like a productive direction or not. And I think for the most part that works really well. It doesn't always work perfectly. And people who have ideas about alternatives sometimes have a little